Tattersall, thanks a lot for coming on, mate. How are you?
I'm brilliant, thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast today. It's been a great experience so far. Lovely to meet you.
Good man, thanks a lot. So I think the best way to start is if you could just kind of give us, I was having a look through your LinkedIn, and I know you've had several different job roles, and you've kind of worked your way up. If you could just give us a bit of an intro about how you got into care and your journey so far.
Okay, so I joined the care industry around when I was about 18, 19 years of age. I was waiting to join the Royal Marines, and I got a job as an interim period as a support worker working for a family business at the time, doing support work within the community setting. From there, I absolutely loved it and decided that was my career path, and I decided not to go into the military and continue within the health and social care sector. As you say, I've done multiple different roles, from support workers into more senior roles, operation roles, national operational roles, some director position roles. And recently, I've joined Lifeways in probably the last 2 years, doing business development. So my core job at this present time is to source land and developments, work with the NHS and the commissioning team, and source accommodation and properties that we can either refurb or build from ground up to support people with learning disabilities within the community.
No, amazing. And if we'd actually just keep on that topic at the moment, I think how are you finding that piece of work around finding land, developments, how is that looking at the moment? Because, it's been well publicised that there needs to be more suitable units and services available for those that need it.
I think there's plenty of land and there's plenty of developments, opportunities. There's plenty of investors, in fact. But I think really the key thing with Lifeways is finding the right investor with the right moral compass and the right values to create some of these quite special, unique schemes. I think the issue that we've got and the issue we found is it always comes down to cost. And cost not just within Lifeways or the investors themselves, the whole health and social care sector as a whole. Probably over the last 5 years, we've seen a decrease in actually funding for the health and social care sector, which plays a massive factor. I think really within Lifeways, we try and give an offering of being creative with the support models that we can offer. We use assistive technology, we use a little bit of tech, and we try and look at our existing stock to see if there's any housing stock that potentially needs re-providing for, or there's a better form of property that we can potentially source to future-proof the clients' homes and environments they live in. I suppose if you look at technology as a whole and going into that in a little bit more detail, Lifeways are on quite a journey really, I suppose, over the last 18 months. We've just onboarded a new CEO called Andrea Kincaid. She's brought in lots of different resources, and we've got two very clear goals within Lifeways. One, to be the employer of choice, and two, to be the care provider of choice by 2026. So to enable us to do that, we've got to stand out from the rest, stand out from our competitors, and we've onboarded two forms of software. So one was Nourish, which I don't know if you've ever come across, Josh. It's an online care planning platform which be able to complete our care plans and almost become far more paperless within the care setting. We've also aligned that with another platform called Deputy, and Deputy is going to manage all our commissioned hours to show the exact hours that are being delivered. We're going to run our payroll off it, we're going to run annual leave and all sorts of different things off that. So them two specialist bits of kit really combined with our already, our care offering, our care approach is going to be very, very special over the next 18 months. So we've got a rollout at the minute, Josh, which we're aiming to probably complete this probably by the end of the month or around probably the next 18 months at the very latest.
No, that's perfect. And I guess, they're getting the right tech in is massive because, I think historically, and I know in still some services now, the care sector is still quite paper heavy.
Yeah.
It hasn't quite moved as forward as other sectors in terms of moving away from that, taking everything offline, online, and moving away from that paper trail.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think probably COVID gave us the kickstart that we all needed. Especially, you know, a lot of our meetings went onto Teams. We started networking a little bit more on the kind of forms of platform like me and you have today over LinkedIn. So I think it started to kind of escalate that kind of process. But I think, you know, we've been talking about this around technology and the use of technology probably for the past 8 to 10 years, and we haven't really managed to move the sector as a whole on. There's some leaders within the sector, and with Lifeways being one of the biggest care providers in the UK for learning disabilities, we're trying to take them forward steps to kind of lead the sector as a whole.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's definitely, yeah, it's a real positive step. But in terms of, if we go back a bit again around talking about costs and buildings and stuff like that, in terms of what's kind of Lifeways model? Is it more to kind of go towards finding properties that maybe you could turn around, or building buildings from scratch, or acquiring housing that maybe needs a complete renovation that you can turn into kind of apartments for supported living? Do you know what I mean? What's the kind of typical model for Lifeways?
Yeah, I suppose, Josh, it's probably a little bit of everything, really, if we're honest. So we can develop. We'll either source land and developments. We will either source, you know, maybe an old Victorian property that we can convert into maybe 6 or 7 flats. Some of our properties are single-person units, so they could potentially be a bungalow for a, you know, low-level accommodation need. So it depends really on the clientele or the cohort of clients that are coming through, and we'll always work very closely with the commissioners. We will never develop any schemes without commission support, and we'll always partner up with a registered provider or registered housing provider to make sure that we get the enhanced housing benefit, the intensive housing element is delivered for the clients we support, and it allows us to operate and scale up in a far more efficient, more professional way, really, and gives us, well, the more security for the people we support. So it means if, you know, Lifeways ever exit, you know, that support offer, it means another care provider can come in with which meant that the clients wouldn't ever lose their homes, which is really important value, really, that Lifeways wants to kind of retain.
Yeah, no, amazing, no, spot on. And then looking kind of, you mentioned before around kind of employer of choice by 2026 and kind of your journey to get there. What does that look like? Because, you know, in hindsight, you can imagine all providers are kind of hoping to go on that journey, but actually, what does that kind of look like internally and externally?
So probably I'm part of the senior leadership team within Lifeways, and we meet every quarter throughout the year. So we meet 4 times a year, and we kind of go through kind of what that offering would look like. So I think what we've done is we've stripped it right back to basics and looked at every single individual role within Lifeways. So from your support frontline staff to your team leaders, your seniors, your team managers, your area managers, and we basically looked and mapped out their career plan and what a career path would look like for them. You know, what kind of stages would they require to get to? Would they have to hold a MVQ level 3 or 5? Would they have to maybe complete 2 or 3 years service within Lifeways? So we've mapped out a very clear criteria so people know when they've hit that kind of criteria mark, they will be eligible then to go and maybe, you know, apply for one of these positions within Lifeways. But also as well, when they look at their cohort of you know colleagues and they can see other people progressing, it also inspires others then to progress within the Lifeways group. Lifeways, even though it's a core model of a care company, it has so many aspects to it. So we have our finance department, we have a marketing team, we have a tender bids team, we have a business development department, we have all sorts. We have HR. So there's so many elements within Lifeways, and yes, it's a company, but it's mini companies within that company. So it's endless, you know. And we've had people from a support worker that've gone across into a business development role. We've had people that are in area manager roles have gone off into HR. So there's a real flex in the offering, really. And what we want to try and do is retain our staff, look after them, and treat them well, so they would want to stay and progress within Lifeways. I think a big key thing what we're looking to do as well is looking around pay, you know, and paying people fairly, and being competitive really within the marketplace. So at the minute we are a real living provider, where we can, in majority of the areas that we cover and we support, we pay the real living wage. That is something that we're really kind of passionate about, and paying people correctly. We've also as well introduced a national pay review. So as cost of living goes up, every year annually our pay will be reviewed. That's not to say that it'll always be increased, but it'll be reviewed in the market to see if it's still competitive in comparison to kind of cost of living, and them increasing increase prices. So yeah, they're two kind of things: is paying people right, training people correctly, and making sure people are well supervised, trained, and looked after through their working time with Lifeways. And I think at the minute what we're looking to do, and especially going back to kind of circling back to what we were talking around about deputy, is about making sure that people aren't overworked, but they've got enough time so they can pick up some overtime when they require. We're looking at contracts, so there's enough flex within that. So some people may only want to do mornings, some people want to do later on shifts. People have children, and all these factors we've got to try and consider. So we try and make sure there's a flexible offer in there as well around the contracts. We also, as well, within all our services, we are trying to remove agency from all our services altogether to a certain degree. I know you come from an agency background. There's an element of agency, and I do want to kind of touch on that with you, Josh. But we use an agency some of our core services. So what we've managed to do over the last 18 months is managed to recruit over 10%, and that's then allowed us then to deliver a consistency really to the people we support with our own staff, with our own services. So what we'll do is make sure that we'll always factor in any kind of maternity or paternity, long-term sick or training, and it allows us then to keep that consistency within all our services. I think where we potentially would use agency, we would be more open, and I've spoken about this on a couple of people and a couple of recruiters up to now, is around that kind of power team offering. So we're looking to scale up Lifeways and grow quite an aggressive growth plan over the next probably 18 months to 2 years. And what we would like to see is almost like power teams that can come in. They can deliver really high spec, really high level of support, potentially with your own training alongside our Lifeways training. And they're able to come in a short period of time, maybe over 2 or 3 months period, and then eventually we'll take that team out and replace them with our Lifeways team. The reason for this is when we open up a scheme, potentially, it's a 12, 14 unit flat scheme. If we move into that area, if we're already 10% overstaffed with our surrounding services, we don't then have a pool of staff members we can just tap into. So normally, to kind of mobilise a service or a scheme similar to this, we'd have to recruit probably within about 4 to 6 weeks, and we have to recruit really, really quickly. Now, sometimes we may miss out some really good candidates as a result of that, just because the window's so short. So it allows us to extend that window, extend the offering, and be able to recruit over a longer period of time to get the right candidates, the right kind of calibre of staff to mobilise and set up these services and remain in these services long term. So that's where I personally see recruitment slightly changing, and it means that it's a financially viable because you get a block booking and you potentially get 10, 12 staff. But it also allows us then to maybe get to know them staff members a little bit more, so we have the consistency as well. So it almost has the best of both worlds, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think everything you just said was spot on. If we just go back, we'll break through it. I've written a few bits down. And I think the first thing you mentioned, obviously, is around kind of training and development. And I think something that needs to be looked at more in the sector is there's a massive issue around kind of recruitment as a whole. I know different providers have better success than others for different reasons, but I think part of the training piece is spot on. It's about the retention piece. If we're not getting high turnover of staff, we're keeping them, then you're building your kind of future leaders. So your managerial roles people are kind of walking into them already, and I think that's something that definitely needs to be kind of addressed more. And then you've got your piece around kind of why social care is a good space to work in, because like you said, you do have your care space, or you can move into HR or finance, or you can go down whichever avenue you want, which is quite unique, where you go into a finance company, you're doing finance and that's it. But social care, you can navigate your career path and kind of change direction should you wish, which I think if providers are open to that, they've got such a better possibility of retaining staff again, because actually maybe this route's not for them now, but have you thought about X, Y, and Z. And is that something that you guys are looking to push?
Yeah, to be honest with you, and I think not just push it, but we've also got some real good examples. That people have been with Lifeways for a very very long time, been very loyal to the business, and they've seen a development pathway over a period of time. But I think what we want to try and do is share that offering a little bit wider to our full staff team. So everyone says, well, actually, anyone that joins Lifeways has got an opportunity to develop, and these are the stages that you've got through. These are the qualifications, and this is how we will underpin and support you through that journey. And I think it's that little bit of a hand-held approach that we've kind of really drilled down to and fine-tuned really over the past 18 months, and looking at that kind of offering and making sure people are feel valued really within the company. Because Lifeways is a very vast, it is a very big company. Like I say, we're the biggest care provider in the UK for learning disabilities. So to kind of scale up, but it still has got that kind of people, that people touch, because I think the whole business is a people-based business. And it's all about people. People we support, people we employ. So yeah, it's really important. So then values are really, really key, and I think it comes from the leadership team. But Andrea Kincaid, our CEO, is a real driver for that. She really wants the best for every single individual she comes across, and I think just giving you an example of some of that. As you well know, CEOs are often very busy and stretched in multiple different directions. Andrew actually meets with some of our staff and have it as a breakfast lunch club, just to pick their brain, get a bit of an ideas, get a bit of a feel for what's on the ground, what's going on out there, and that's proven to be very very successful so far.
No, I think that's really important, because we've had a guy on this podcast previously called Steve, who's a regional director for Avery Healthcare, predominantly kind of like elderly dementia, that sort of thing. And one of the things he said is around what he likes to do as a leader is still be very much on the front line when he can, go and interact with people, find out what's going on, speak to the residents if you can, the staff, and actually understand what's going on. I think that's really important for a leader, to be present still and understand what's going on a day-to-day.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's the beauty of Lifeways. So I've worked for multiple different companies, and I've had some great experiences and great times. But I think Lifeways is really a very special company, because you'd expect it to be far more corporate than it is, but it's actually far more approachable. It's actually the opposite, and I think you'll find all our senior leadership team will get in the thick of it, roll up the sleeves, understand. I think another example for you, Josh, today is our regional director James Dennison. He actually encourages all our team, especially the leaders within the Northwest, is to go out and complete shifts every couple of months in the service alongside our staff, to see exactly what they go through on a day-to-day. If we can improve things, if we can change, if we can learn just from one another. So it's them kind of simple things, simple days, but they kind of really bring you
the
back to
as
that,
well.
That core value and what's important really. And really, you can bring in all the technology in the world and all the fancy systems and everything else, but unless we actually know what the purpose is, what our client group is getting out of that, it's no use really at all. So it's really important to get in the thick of it. And I think, like you say, Josh, it's you got to lead by example as well. It's something that can't be all managed behind a laptop. You've got to get in the thick of it and know what the staff members are doing and what they're facing on a day to day. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, no, spot on. No, I couldn't agree more. And then you mentioned around kind of agency, and obviously I've at the moment our main focus is kind of more on the permanent side. We don't really do temp, but historically I've been in temp recruitment for probably about 10 years prior.
Right.
So I do think what you're saying around kind of the way the landscape is changing slightly, and it's more kind of creating core staffing teams on kind of interim projects to help services get to the growth they need. And I think that's definitely the way to move forward, because I think a lot's happened previously, and it's something I've witnessed myself, is a real lack of continuity. And especially residents within these, if they can see the same faces day in day out, they're going to be in a much better place than not knowing who's around and a continuous change.
Yeah.
And what's your kind of how how's your kind of approach to that? Is it kind of looking at working with set agencies, kind of changing your approach to how you work with them? What kind of things are you looking to do behind the scenes to kind of ensure that happens, I guess?
So I'm not heavily involved really with the vetting of the agencies, if I'm totally honest with you. My kind of role and responsibility is more focus on the relationships, especially with key stakeholders. However, our regional director James would often, vet companies. He would look at their training. He'll look at what training actually we can provide alongside that to kind of marry up as well. It does come down to a competitive cost rate as well, because we're only getting funded a certain amount from the local authority. We would also as well look to make sure that we only actually work with maybe a small handful of trusted recruiters and companies similar to yourself, only because the fact is if we kind of spread ourselves too thin, it's more difficult to manage. So we only use a very small amount of agency within the Northwest region. So our last stats were about 0.4%. So on all the commissioned hours that we deliver, which is extremely low, given the care sector itself. And as I say, by the end of this month, we've got a reduction plan to remove it altogether. There's some areas that have managed to move it all together up to this point. And there's some, as you well know, there's some little hotspots, where they're kind of locations, they're quite rural, they're hard to recruit for, which is that little 0.4% at the minute. But we're quietly confident we'll remove it altogether by the end of the year. And again, aligning up that Deputy, Nourish, and all the other platforms, they're now actually all speaking to one another, so we can kind of pull off some data, and exactly, where we're at and where we need to recruit for now. So, yeah. It's been quite a journey really over the last 18 months. There's lots of things going on and all happening all at once. So
no, that's really positive, because I think there's a lot of providers that still probably is slightly over reliant on agencies still, or have a demand much higher than they would like. What ideas or suggestions would you have for, obviously I know you're not too heavily invested in kind of the vetting side, but from your experience of what you're seeing, what kind of advice would you kind of give to those providers that are kind of struggling to reduce it to the levels that they're comfortable with?
I think we actually went to Cheshire West provider event, and we actually met, we got put on tables and we started doing a bit of a workshop and a bit of an environment around there. And this actual topic came up, and we was looking at kind of some of the bigger providers, similar to Lifeways, with all the resources that we have available, and some of the smaller providers, maybe they only have 1 or 2 services, maybe it's a family business, maybe they're just starting off. It's very different. I suppose the key facts to reducing agency or working with agencies is to make sure that you get the good training. There's trust, there's consistency. I think that's probably the key, really. And I suppose recruitment as a whole, Lifeways have a recruitment team, and that's what they're doing in, day out, as recruiting staff, vetting them, making sure we have the right kind of candidates. And I think always trying to overstaff. And I think that 10% is really, really key. When you're overstaffing a service, you've got to be able to manage your rotors really, really effectively, because actually you've got 10% you're trying to find. So you need to plan out your training, plan out your annual leave, plan out time off, to make sure that you can give that 10% back into the workforce. So it's quite a difficult task, but you've got to be really organised. And I think the other big key thing is what me and you were saying before, Josh, was around actually retention. Not just onboarding the staff, but actually what do they get out of it? And at the minute, there's a lot of care providers out there. Most local authorities got at least 165 care providers on the books. So there's lots of competition. So it's actually being a provider and offering that you can skill people up, you can give people a career, you can give people a career pathway, you can give them good training, make sure they feel really, really well valued. They're probably the approaches that we've found being successful in Lifeways to retain our staff, retain our staff team group, really. But as we also know, Josh, there is quite a high turnover in care, and that's a statistic anyway, and that's right across the board, regardless of Lifeways or a smaller identity. But it's definitely something that we have to continue to battle against and review consistently, really.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think there's always going to be some form of turnover. It's just, I think, how you manage it. And I think the work that's done, as you're proving yourselves, the work you do internally is only going to help kind of reduce that to a manageable level, I guess. In terms of kind of the social care sector as a whole, what kind of, it gets, I'd say, pretty bad press. There's lots of negative stories in the news, which I don't think there's far more positive stories that don't get spoken about that outweigh the negative, but it seems to be the negative that always seems to get highlighted. Where do you think the sector is at the moment, and what kind of changes need to come in over the next kind of?
I think it's a little bit behind,
months.
if I'm totally honest with you. And I think there's definitely a huge amount of growth really within the sector. I think some individual care companies are doing the best with the small amount of resources and finances that have been provided. But I think it needs a huge investment. I think you look at the new government and potentially changes in that. I don't think that's going to be our answer, regardless of what government takes over. I still think there's going to be the issue within the health and social care sector. And I think if you look back at the times of COVID, it was highlighted what a great job the care sector does, and how heavy how little resources we actually had. And you would think almost that had a little bit of a springboard, and it did. But I feel like that's just then tailed back off again, and I don't think it's recognised for the amount of work and the specialist work that's actually completed within the sector. If you look at our support staff, we have a number of different offerings within Lifeways. We have a residential services, we have mental health services, and we have learning disability services. So them three divisions we've split so we can actually provide our care offering far more bespoke really within that kind of niche level of support. Our staff members are given antipsychotic medication out. They are sometimes being verbally or physically abused. And they go through a real tough time. But then if you look at a comparison of them going into the supermarket, they could probably be paid that or a little bit more. And it's always trying to compete against that, really. And it takes a very, very special person to join the health and social care sector, because you're not really joining for finances. You're joining for passion and actually getting a lot out of your role and helping other people. So it's I think you find that it's very special people in general, not just in Lifeways but in the care sector as a whole, that choose this as a chosen career. And I think that you've got to have a real element of wanting to help people. You want to help to support people. You want to see people, and I think that's where you get your buzz from, is seeing someone progress or do well or achieve something they haven't potentially achieved previously before. So I think it's underfunded, under-recognised, but I think there's definitely steps in the right direction. I think we also partner up with a couple of other bigger care providers, and we often share good practice as well. So things that are working for us, brainstorming different ideas. And I think as well, it comes with a bit of responsibility, Lifeways being one of the biggest care providers, because they are, especially other care providers, are looking to Lifeways for kind of guidance and next steps and stuff like that. We've also been discussing around, because we have all this expertise within Lifeways, do we start to share some of that as well with our competitors, a little bit more, and help maybe some other smaller care providers? And that was a bit of a common theme when we went to the Cheshire East workshop, the provider event, and just to kind of look at how we could potentially co-work with other care companies and share some of that good practice really, and help other people as well a little bit more, and share that care offering. So yeah,
no, 100%. And I think the fact that the care sector is moving more online, there's a lot more tools available that they're using, means there's a lot more data that can be analysed and shared to actually help drive growth, retention, and kind of keep people moving forward. So it's definitely in a better place than it has been previously. I would say, in terms of we'll kind of look to wrap up shortly, but in terms of, there's a lot of discussions around kind of care providers like yourself, the local authorities, the NHS, and not always kind of working together How do you guys, or how do you kind of find that, and what kind of changes possibly could be made there?
I think that was another thing that came up as that past them conversations, and I think the NHS are now linking in with the commissioning teams a little bit more, because sometimes a lot of these packages are dual funded. So there's a lot more partnership work, and then I think the sector as a whole has seen there's been a gap that needed bridging. So there is far more kind of co-working together, I'd say, around that. I think around, working with commissioners, I think commissioners are stretched. I think we could do with more of them, if I'm totally honest with you. But all the commissioners I work with, I think they work extremely hard. They do their very, very best. They often come back to me. I have 21 local authorities I cover in the Northwest alone. I'm meeting with 17 of them over the next 12 weeks. To kind of look at how we can support them as a care company, so looking at their pinch points, looking at where they've got an appetite for growth, what kind of services they require, where they actually require some of these services. Because sometimes we're looking at schemes and we find a potential site or a development that we think is really great. However, we can't see all the other care providers potentially in that location. Now, the commissioners do. They have access to be able to see all the other care providers as well as Lifeways, and we can actually plot out potentially where we look to need to develop more services, or where there's a shortfall of services and we require more services, and what kind of types of services we require. So I think I'm very, very privileged and very lucky, really, that I have an awful lot of interactions, really, and back and forth with the commissioners. I can't fault them, that they're trying their very best, that they're doing everything they possibly can. But I think there needs to be more of them, and I think they need more resources and more support, really, just simply down to their workload and the vast amount of workload they've got to try and cover. It's a very difficult, not an easy job, really. So,
yeah, no, 100%. No, that's spot on. No, that's really good. But yeah, lastly, we'll look to kind of leave it there. But I guess what we likely to see kind of coming out of Lifeways over the next 6 to 12 months? What's going on there?
I think we are going to go to pretty much head towards paperless service. I think we were going to kind of be one of the biggest, largest leaders within the care sector. I think we will start to change the way we develop services, and we'll probably head towards most people even having their own front door, flat schemes, bungalows, and very bespoke kind of properties that are home for life more than anything else. I think within Lifeways, we want to try and start banging on the doors of government and start making changes within the health and social care sector for the right way. Do campaigns and champion other care providers. So I think there's a real good energy around Lifeways at this minute in time, and there's a real big scope for change. But I think we feel that element of pressure that we've got to lead the sector as a whole, and be one of the leaders, to make sure these positive changes happen. I think it's easy to kind of moan and groan about it, but I think we've got to be far more solution focused and lead the way, if I'm honest, Josh.
Yeah, no, spot on. Love that. Let's leave it there. That was awesome. Cheers, buddy.
All right. Great to meet you today, Josh.
And you, mate.